Do you wish that all things wealth and finance were much easier to understand and not presented by a bunch of beige cardigan-wearing geeks? Welcome to the Clever Investor Podcast, where we're dishing up the easiest to understand finance program served in bite-sized chunks, so your brain will thank you as your knowledge grows. Hosted by the brilliant Owen Taylor, a multiple award-winning expert with a glorious knack for explaining the complex world of wealth in the simplest of ways.
Hey, clever investors, and welcome to another show. As we record this podcast today, we're in the final preparation stages for one of the events that we run at Blue Wealth Property that I love being along for. It's the Generation Z or Z. We had the big debate in the office, but
it's definitely Z.
It's Z. It's Z. I'm old enough to call it Z. This is an event that is specifically put together for the, speaking as a mid-50s person, the younger generation, the late teens into their 20s. And it's something that I'm very passionate about and educating people. And as you'd have just heard just then, we've got a guest back in the studio today, the founder and CEO of Blue Wealth Property, Dr. Tony Hayek. And I've grabbed him today because I wanted again to touch on the psychology of this situation, this whole event, this buying property thing for a generation that a lot of them are going to sadly bury their head in the sand, and it's all too much, and have a victim story about it. Tony, welcome.
Thank you, mate. Good to see you, as always.
Gen Z and buying property.
Yep.
Is it really? Can we really help them? Have they ever got a chance to do it, or should they just give up?
Well, as someone who is basically your age, I'm going to claim a few years younger. We are of the generation with a different letter, so we're Gen X, and our generation, not unlike every generation since, was told that they couldn't afford to buy property and they'd be priced out of the property market. And the reality is that Gen Z is a different generation to the millennials or Gen Y, and Gen Y was a different generation to Gen X, and we're a different generation to the baby boomer. And the reality is that we need to understand the needs and profile of each generation in order to educate them appropriately. And what we found over the last, I've been doing this now for more than 20 years, and so many of my clients have aged with me or with us, and now they find themselves in their 50s with Gen Z children or younger Gen Y children, the sort of end of Gen Y, beginning of Gen Z type generation. And they're now coming in to invest. And a lot of people are surprised that, this current generation can actually afford to buy. But the reality is that they can certainly afford to buy. They just have to think differently. I think the biggest challenge that we find ourselves in 2023 is that still the people that disseminate the information, who are typically older, come from generations with a different baseline, a different perspective, a different thought process. Yeah, we grew up in a generation where you bought your own home and you lived there forever, and then you spent your life paying it off. It was relatively conservative and straightforward. And if you speak to a Gen Z person now, they couldn't think of anything worse than living in the same place their whole life. And so from our perspective, the clarity around what Gen Z wants will help us to better educate them. And when we did our research with the Gen Zers that work in this business and around it, what we think they want is not actually what they want. What they want is life choice. What they want is freedom. They want experiences. And so they will live in multiple different places. We know that the workplaces change, and not only do they have multiple jobs, but they also have multiple careers. And that's very, very different to what we were like when we were kids. Yeah. And in 2023, we're still trying to implement property strategies that were built 100 or more than 100 years ago by our great-grandparents who were all about the great Australian dream. Buy a house, buy it in a good location, and spend your life paying it off. Make sure it's over 1,000 square metres, which was a quarter acre block, and that doesn't apply anymore.
No, who wants to spend the weekend cutting that amount of grass?
Whereas Gen Z has no problem living in apartments. They have no problem moving apartments. They have no problem renting if it's in an area that they want to live in. But at the same time, they also do want to build. They want security. They want to hustle. You know, a lot of them have this, what they call the side hustle, you know, which we used to call a part-time job. But they're thinking differently because they want different things, and their approach has evolved out of the generations before them. And all of that goes to state of mind, as you know.
Yes.
Everything starts and ends in your head. So Gen Z event for us is an opportunity to educate the next generation and show them what's possible by thinking differently. And, you know, it's not necessarily about saving enough money to buy a home in an overpriced suburb of the city they live in because that's where they grew up and that's where they want to live. When you show them an alternative, which, you know, in many cases is rent vesting, you know, investing somewhere else and potentially renting where they want to live, all of a sudden it opens their eyes to a different way of life, a different approach, and they're much, much more comfortable with it. The sad part is that a lot of Gen Z gets sold by the media, by TikTok, by Insta stories and so on, that it's not possible for them. And so a lot of them give up on it.
And I suppose a lot of that as well is also the group of friends that you hang around in as well.
Of course. I mean, my son Joseph is 17. He's just about to finish his HSC. And he spent his whole life listening to me talk about property and thinking differently and you know, building knowledge and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And even the stuff that we didn't talk about directly, he's seen indirectly. And so he will have a completely different perspective than most of the kids of his age. And the Gen Z event will help some of his mates who attended the event to get more clarity on what is possible for them and how thinking differently gives them a leg up on everybody else in their generation.
A critical part is obviously knowledge and surrounding yourself with that. Do you think that the Gen Zs that don't have the family environment around them, some of them have probably, you know, got parents that aren't living together or other different things on that. Do you have to have mum and dad and the 4-bedroom family home in the suburbs in order to do this?
Definitely not. I mean, look, from my perspective, everything I learned was from everyone but my mum and dad. Yeah, my mum and dad were very much around that traditional buy a home, pay it off type environment, get married, have some kids, get a good job, study hard, you know, that kind of, all those sort of traditional lessons you get from your parents. And they certainly didn't achieve in their lives financially the kind of security that they deserved after working as hard as they did, because the knowledge that was imparted on them by their parents was not quite right. And so, sure, they bought the house and paid it off, but now in retirement, they don't have any income generating assets.
They're living in their biggest asset.
Correct. So that's one of the things that we're trying to educate people on. You know, what you need to have income generating assets. And for Gen Z, what they have that no other generation has is time. Yeah, they can almost not even make a mistake. If they can just get into the market and just sit on their property, it will do the job for them.
So I want to pick up on, you just mentioned that word time. So let's hypothetically pretend that I'm a Gen Z and I look at how much money I don't have in the bank at the moment or whatever, and somebody tells me that, because everything I've read on the internet and TikTok tells me I need to save money for the deposit. But when I look at how long it's going to take me to save a deposit, that's 2, maybe 3 years at least, maybe even longer of saving.
Yep.
How do you not lose your way with that plan? Because 4 years when you're 20 something, I remember when I was 20 something, it's like time. It's a long time.
Look, I think there are lots of different ways to do it. Yeah, the fifth biggest bank in Australia right now is the bank of mum and dad. Apparently, over 60% of property transactions, first property transactions were supported by parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, over the last couple of years in this recent wave. So there's this sort of generational money transfer essentially.
Yeah.
Supporting the next generation. That's not something that's unusual. But so for those who don't have that kind of support, many do, but some don't. They certainly need to have a plan, and they need to have someone who can help mentor them and discipline them, and help them keep focused around getting to where they want to go. And sometimes that's using your money wisely while you're waiting for it to build up to the point where you can buy a property. What are you doing with it? You're putting it in the bank and earning 1% on it, or do you have some managed funds? Is it working for you somehow? Do you know what the goal number is? Because the goal number quite often helps a lot of people work backwards. And if I'm going to have a side hustle, what does my side hustle need to look like in order for me to get to that goal? But the problem for most people is they don't have a goal, and they don't have any clarity, and they don't know how much they need.
Well, it's all too confusing. It's all far too much. It's very
overwhelming.
It's a very overwhelming. I mean, so you keep harping on about this, but you need a plan. It sounds so boring.
It is boring. It is boring. Unfortunately, you don't get anything of what you want in your life without some sort of discipline. And us as humans need to tell ourselves the truth. In some ways, I can be very disciplined, and in other ways, very poorly disciplined.
Like with chocolate.
Like with food, for example. And so I think if people tell themselves the truth, they need to surround themselves with people that are going to keep them on track in areas where they're not disciplined. That's why people get personal trainers. That's why people get, subscribe to, dietitians. That's why people have psychologists. That's why, for whatever, So that's why people have coaches. So for me, identifying where your strengths and weaknesses are and working out what your plan looks like in order to keep you on track is critical.
So you mentioned like personal trainers, and I don't have the stats on this, but I would say there's been 100 and something +% increase in personal trainers in the last 10, 15 years. And they're there to keep people on track and you've got a plan. You've told them what the plan is at the beginning, and they're going to make you sweat until you get to it and beyond. So can you get the same type of thing for your finances?
Of course, but it's like anything, I need to give my personal trainer permission to flog me. And then I need to be okay when he or she does. So if I want to save money towards building an asset base that's going to help me in the future to be able to achieve my financial goals and my life goals as a result, people's financial goals really are their life goals. It's about providing them with the money they need to live the life they want, right?
Yeah.
So I need to give someone permission to say, mate, you're not spending that much money, or you're not putting that money there, or you're not they need to give somebody permission to kick their ass, essentially. And that's really important. We've come across lots of different types of people over the 20 years I've been doing this, and people are very good with their money, and some people are very ill-disciplined with their money. Now, if you're of the ill-disciplined type, surround yourself with someone who's going to help you to become more disciplined. Drawing money out of your account, having second account that you get paid into that someone else manages for you, all sorts of different things.
Even from a pay packet point of view, I've known it where people have actually got their own payroll to split their pay into different accounts.
I do it every fortnight when I pay the team. It's 26 of us. I reckon there would be at least half a dozen that have two different bank accounts. So they're sort of, their working bank account and their saving bank account.
It's the one I used to describe to clients that you haven't got ATM access and you can't shout the bar on a Friday night.
Correct. It's a discipline's key.
Discipline can also then come from maybe your friends and family as well.
Correct. So
sharing your goals with them.
Yep, correct. Doesn't matter where the discipline comes from, mate. It can come from the neighbour. Yeah. As long as it's someone who will help you through it and will hold you to account, and someone that you've given permission to that you respect. Yeah, very important. You're typically not going to take guidance or from somebody if you really don't want to do it, or if they're not somebody who can sort of tell you the truth. So choose wisely.
Somebody that's probably, been on that investment journey or is a bit further down the path than what you are.
I always say, never take advice from someone you don't want to be. Never take advice from someone you don't want to be. So, you always hear me talking about the uncle who knows everything but owns nothing. Don't take advice from that guy.
Yeah. They're the ones that are probably going to pull you backwards.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Another little gem. There's a lot of psychology in what we're doing. I think it's very important, as you said, to have a goal and to involve the right people around you with keeping there. It's probably going to take you more than 12 months, 2 years to actually save up to get to your property goals and keeping yourself accountable of it. I'm a big one for vision boards. I know you're a big one of your sayings is don't break the chain, which comes from your love of Jerry Seinfeld.
Yep.
And we'll have to get you back on to actually talk about that sometime, about your analogy
awesome.
on that. So
Awesome.
Thank you again for coming in. We'll get you in again soon. And if you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, tell your friends and family about it, maybe even jump on the platform that you're on and give us a review. I'll see you next week for another edition of the Clever Investor Podcast.
You have been listening to the Clever Investor Podcast, proudly sponsored this week by Blue Wealth Property. Are you ready to start a new investment journey? Get in touch with the industry leaders, Blue Wealth Property. Blue Wealth have a proven track record in using research to identify growth markets, and Blue Wealth have supported thousands of Australians to buy the right property in the right market at the right time. Go to bluewealth.com.au.